Welcome to Illuminati Silver. We tell you the truth about silver. Today is Sunday, the 15th of November 2020, and we're asking the question, are we reaching peak silver? This is the first video in the series following on from our peak gold series, of which there are 5 episodes, all of which are listed in the description box below. So let's get to peak silver. Now in this series, we're looking at what we mean by peak silver, looking at the demand and supply side of the equation, and also looking at differing views that others have as to whether we are close to reaching peak silver, or whether we've perhaps reached it already. But first, let's look at a brief definition of what we mean by the term peak silver. Peak silver may be defined as the maximum rate of global silver extraction. It is the point in time when the peak of bullion's production is reached, after which it is expected to enter a terminal decline. So, in theory, of course, you can reach peak silver and still see silver prices fall if, for example, demand falls, or the differential between silver mining and silver demand increases. So, the first thing we need to do is to take a look at how much silver has been mined versus how much has been demanded, particularly in recent years. So let's take a look at the latest published Silver Institute survey, supply and demand. And we can see here from 2011 up to 2019, they're confirmed figures, and then a forecast 2020. Mine production has, more or less, remained somewhere in between 760 million ounces and, I think, looking here, 892 was the highest level, averaging mid-80s, but the forecast, or 800 I should say, and the forecast for 2020 coming in below 800 million ounces. Now, of course, there are other forms of supply, such as recycling, net hedging, and net official sector sales. And if we look here, we can see we have approximately 1 billion ounces, just over a billion, and maybe 2020 forecast just under 1 billion. So you can see, broadly speaking, actual supply is relatively stable, though it is envisaged that for 2020 it'll be down. Now, of course, it does not take a genius to work out that a number of mines have been adversely affected by the coronavirus pandemic, which has meant that the level of mining that one would have expected to have occurred has not occurred. And that is what I envisage is likely to be the reason for this fall at this present moment in time. Otherwise, we see no reason for these figures not to have actually potentially gone up, bearing in mind that we've seen a rise in silver prices, thereby encouraging silver miners and also other miners to actually extract as much silver as possible in order to meet potential demand. But having said that, we need to look at the demand side of the equation. And we can see, if we go to total demand for a moment, 1 billion, just under, 1 billion, 1 billion, 1 billion, just under is the forecast. And the net position, therefore, is we can see there is a potential, depends if we're looking at net investment ETPs, but you're looking at a potential surplus here, but a deficit if we take into account ETPs. What is so, perhaps for the want of a better term, whether it be encouraging or interesting, is that production is not hugely different, even between the high and the low. And in terms of demand, we see a significant difference, obviously, in industrial demand on times, but then very often that is made up by investment demand, for example. And we can expect, and we will go into demand in a later series, we can expect to see, certainly, because it's been reported so often, jewellery demand to be down for 2020, without any doubt, but equally for physical investment side to be higher. So there's nothing really hitting us here to suggest that there's a major problem with mine production. Having looked at what the Silver Institute has published, we can see that silver mining generally is relatively stable at or around a billion ounces, and silver demand holding a not dissimilar position, though of course the types of demand and the reason for demand may indeed change. Let's now take a brief look at how large silver reserves available still to be mined and compare that slightly with gold. Now, when asking how much gold and silver has actually been mined, with a focus obviously on silver, we found this site called usmoneyreserve.com, which is a blog. And interestingly, if we read what they are stating, how much silver has been mined, to date, 1.74 million metric tons of silver has been discovered around the world, according to the US Geological Survey. The 4 countries producing the bulk of the world's silver are Mexico, China, Peru, and Russia. Global supply from silver mines fell by 1.3% in 2019, the Silver Institute reports. It was the 4th consecutive year of global supply decline. How much demand is there for silver? Global silver demand grew by 0.4% in 2019 versus 2018, despite the ongoing global trade war, the Silver Institute notes. Driving that demand was a 12% rise in the purchase of silver as an asset. Meanwhile, demand for silver and jewellery, silverware, photography, and industrial products slipped. Now, this is the point, or the part, for us to focus on: how much silver is in the world compared to gold. Nearly 198,000 metric tons of gold have been mined over time, the World Gold Council says, compared with almost 1.74 million metric tons of silver. Therefore, the amount of mined silver far exceeds the amount of mined gold, approximately, according to my calculations, 8.5 times. How much gold and silver are waiting to be mined? The World Gold Council estimates that 54,000 metric tons of gold remains to be mined, and that's versus roughly 560,000 metric tons of silver still below ground. Where can silver be found? In 2019, silver mines worldwide produced an estimated 27,000 metric tons, thanks in part to stepped-up production in Argentina, Australia, Mexico and Poland, the USGS reports. Mexico led global silver production in 2019, which was 6,300 metric tons, followed by Peru, 3,800, China, 3,600, and Russia, 2,100. So we're looking, according to these, at approximately 10 times the amount of silver still to be mined, roughly speaking, than gold, 54,000 metric tons versus 560. How much silver is left in the world? About 560,000 metric tons of silver reserves remain around the world, with Peru leading the way, followed by Poland, Australia and Russia. Let's leave this point here and we'll go back to the discussion. The important point to note here is the word reserve. These are knowable, mineable quantities utilizing current technology, and one would wager close to current prices. In other words, these are what are available to mine within a reasonable price bracket. But how much silver actually exists both above and below the Earth's crust? Let's take a look at what the Royal Mint claim exists there. So if we take a quick look at the Royal Mint Bullion section, and we ask how much silver is in the Earth's crust, before we go there, an interesting comment, it says, what makes a metal precious? It must be naturally occurring metallic element, gold, silver, platinum, and other precious metals like osmium are all metals in a chemical sense and naturally occurring. It must be rare, it must be valuable. How much gold, silver, platinum exists on Earth? We're looking at the amount of these metals in the Earth's crust. We're unlikely to gather industrially or commercially useful amounts of material from the Earth's much deeper mantle anytime soon, let alone from the molten core itself, so the huge volumes of these metals in those regions can be ignored. The rarity of a metal is best expressed as its mass fraction, or how many kilograms can be expected to be found per billion kilograms of crust material. Of course, they're not evenly distributed, or mining would be impossible, but the number is still useful. And you can see that gold is 4 parts per billion, and silver is 75 parts per billion. Interestingly, platinum, 5, osmium, 1.5, and other platinum group metals, 1 part. So, if we go down to silver, we have how much silver has been mined and how much is left. Using the same estimates, there is roughly 7.5 trillion kilograms of silver. So we move now from tons to kilograms here. There is roughly 7.5 trillion kilograms of silver throughout the Earth's crust. To date, 1.4 billion kilograms, and remember a trillion is normally 1,000 billion, of silver have been mined throughout human history. However, it does admit that silver corrodes, and just under half of that silver no longer exists as a metal. Of what has been mined, only 777 million kilograms still exist. So we can see that in terms of how much silver is in the ground, and it really doesn't matter, frankly, how far out those estimates are, we can see that there is still an enormous quantity of silver in the Earth's crust. Of course, the key issue is how can you access it and at what price? How easy it is, and will current technology enable one to do that? But let's not be fooled when you're told there's no silver left in the ground. There's plenty there. It's just a question of where and how one can extract it. And that is the more important question, and one we shall look at in a later video. Well, if they're right, we can see that in terms of how much silver exists within the Earth's crust, then for sure we're not going to run out. Of course, how much of that is mineable is another matter, and we shall return to that in a future episode. Now, with regards to how much silver is held above ground, we shall look at this in episode 2, and you may find it's more than you think. Thank you so much for listening. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. Not forgetting to press the bell sign so you're notified of our videos as and when they are published. By all means, please enter any comments you may have concerning this series, and if you have spare time, pop over to the Richard and Greg channel, where we generally update 1 or 2 videos a week to discuss other global affairs. So until episode 2, thank you for listening. We hope you have found this video interesting and informative, and if so, please give it a thumbs up and share it on social media. Please ensure that you have subscribed to our channel and press the bell sign so that you are notified of any future videos. Also, kindly visit our website at illuminatisilver.com, and if you haven't already done so, please subscribe either as a free or paying member for regular email updates and offers. Disclaimer: Illuminati Silver owners come from a background of banking, international wealth management and economics. Having now retired from these worlds, we are not qualified to give investment advice. Therefore, this and other productions must not be deemed to be giving such advice and merely represent the personal views of its owners.